10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, everybody. I'm John O'Hare in Norman, Oklahoma. I am thrilled to be a part of this channel through Black and White Eyes. I'll be joining in just a minute. Someone will be joining me. That's Dan Devlin, my co-host. And I know Dan really well now. Dan knows me really well now. And we hope to share some of that today and let you guys know who we are and what we're about and how we have a passion for Newcastle United. So stay tuned. And there he is.
And there you are.
Dan Devlin.
Good How you doing, John?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I feel like we talk a lot now.
Yes, we do.
Little inside joke there. Hey, you know, Dan, I thought we'd start out with the name of our show is Barcode Banter. Nufc thoughts from North America.
Yep,
so since your wife helped to shape this thing, she really got us off to a good start as we were brainstorming. Maybe you could describe what that means to you, and then I'll throw a couple thoughts in.
Certainly. I hope my canine coworker is not being picked up on the microphone. So, no, we were kicking some names around about what we could call a show if we ever had the opportunity, and you know, there's lots of black and white. There's lots of NUFC. There's lots of you know, tune and talk of the fog of the time, pod of the time. You know, and we watch all of those. What I didn't see was anybody taking ownership of a positive connotation to the Barcode nickname.
Yeah.
You know, for the 30 years this year that I've been a Newcastle United supporter, you know, Barcodes has always been some kind of derogatory comment about us because, you know, when we're amassed in our black and white stripes, we look like an army of barcodes. So I thought, you know, well, when you approached me with this idea of a show, it was kind of there's lots of programs out there that are, you know, several times a week and talking about, you know, match reactions or match previews or, you know, all that kind of stuff. And there's always a bit of banter in between, you know, the hosts and the guests and stuff. So, you know, a little bit of alliteration there. We took advantage, and Barcode Banter was born. And since we're both based in the United States, we've been invited to participate on a whole bunch of shows that are UK based. You know, since you and I will be doing this one together, I figured we know lots of people all over the United States that we've met in our social media forays, and then also on our travels, and Canada, and, you know, a couple of people in San Diego, originally from Mexico, that kind of thing. So
there's the cue. Shameless plug for the guys in San Diego.
There you go.
And the reason I say that is these guys really kicked off some really good podcasts, and Dan and I were lucky enough to participate. And that was Rich and Shade, our good friends, and they hang out with Eddie, who's also a really good friend. And I love those guys. Those guys are welcome on here anytime. If they want to help co-host a show, they're welcome anytime. So enough of the shameless plug.
That would be great. Oh, but I also see, you know, our first appearance of the wooden spoon. So there you go.
Yeah, I'll try to keep that to a minimum.
No, it's great. No, I love that. I love it. But that's what I was saying. I was just saying, you know, Barcode Banter is what Tara, my missus, thought about. She just said that you guys are are good guys wearing black and white stripes, and you talk a lot. So
Yeah, there you go.
there you go. That's us.
We'll talk over each other too. Just
Absolutely.
yeah. So what I thought about Barcode banter was, yeah, I think it's funny that all fans used to give us, stick about that. They make fun of our uniforms, black and white. You look like a barcode, but we're going to have the last laugh. You call us whatever you want. So
Exactly.
so that's good. Thank you for that title. That works for me.
Oh, all the good ideas on this side of the country come from my wife. So there you go.
So a couple things. I thought we might just kind of start out with what we hope for the show.
Sure.
What do we want to do? And this is some of my ideas, some of your ideas, and we're going to work it out. It's just going to percolate for a while, and we're going to figure out where our niche is.
This is the first one, so
Yeah.
kind of a trial run, so to speak.
Yeah, and so I'll start off. I think we appreciate the support we get from all over the country, all over North America, and wherever possible, we find a story from a supporter. We'll focus on it. We'll invite them on the show.
Mhm.
And I got my first group lined up. I don't know if there'll be the second show, but I've been communicating with Lisa in Baltimore, who has two sons who do their own podcast. And I think they're age 12 and 10, the two that are on the podcast.
Wow.
And they've started a little network that they're practicing their sports broadcasting and everything. And so I thought we'd try and get them on. Their name is Ash and Jack.
Oh, that's awesome.
They run ASPN, that's Ash's network. And so I've been talking back and forth with Lisa, and I'll introduce you to them in some future show, but we're excited to have them on, and they'll tell us what they do in terms of, what teams they cover. And then we will give them a homework assignment to cover Newcastle United. I sent them some video clips today. So,
great.
So that's what I hope for the channel. Just involve other people.
You said that they're from Baltimore.
Yes.
So there's your connection.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's happened to be where I was born.
There you go.
So I'm just as wildly excited about my Orioles as I am about Newcastle. And what do you know? They're both doing really good now. So, after years of suffering, they've turned it around. So, yeah, nod to Baltimore and Jack and Ash.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hold on. Hey, Jack, I got a canine issue. I got to take care of it really quick. Do we have a sponsor for our new show?
We do. Thank you. Yes, we do. And I'll cover that right now. Let's just go to one of our best sponsors ever, Dyer Crow Shop. These guys are a family-based business out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I met the owner in Atlanta this summer. They do a great job. Small business, always support a small business. And they've got some fine Newcastle United shirts. And here's another example of that. Macam Slayer. All right. And they come out with new ones all the time. So you got to kind of follow it. I have the Away the Lads shirt, and I also have one that had the schedule printed on it at the beginning of the year. But they've been terrific. And we also get a discount through the network here, 20% off if you use this code BAZ20. So thanks for that. All right. Back to the show.
I think I've taken care of the canine issue.
I had to too. So we may have times where we're both interrupted.
We have 4 rescue pups at our house.
Oh my gosh!
So and they would dearly love to meet everybody outside, including Amazon delivery men and FedEx delivery men and UPS delivery people, and so they want to greet everybody at the front window, and it's boisterous around here. So, but that's okay.
You never know if it's an alarm or if it's just hey, there's somebody at the door.
Exactly. So
Girl Scout cookies. What do you know?
exactly.
So yeah, we've had rescue dogs too. It's amazing when we compare notes, Dan, how much we have similarity. Your dad was in the civil service for many years. My dad was in the civil service for many years. We traveled around a lot. You traveled around a lot. Yeah, there's just so much commonality. And then we're both Newcastle fans, fanatics.
And
So,
that was the neat thing when I mean, we've been following each other on social media for a while, specifically, Twitter X or whatever you want to call it today.
right.
And it was just, you would comment on my posts, I'd comment on your posts and everything, but we'd never met each other in person.
Yeah.
So, then I saw pictures of you over on social media. I saw pictures of you on Tyneside. So then, you mentioned our friends down in San Diego. We saw Shade on social media, and he was getting some recognition from Premier League mornings and stuff.
Yep.
And the San Diego Mags, with their big groups out in front of the Bluefoot in San Diego. So all of a sudden, I got a text message from you back last April,
Yeah.
and you said, hey, can I talk to you? And I said, sure, I'll call you tomorrow. So I called you the next day, and the next thing you know, I'm going to Newcastle with my wife because you had a spare ticket and to a match, and we
Yeah.
get over there. And my wife says it was the strangest case of deja vu, because we got off the metro at St. James's Park, and you were already on the platform waiting for us, and that was something something my dad would do. And in fact did on our honeymoon when we were in London.
That's right.
He somehow tracked us down in our hotel. We never told him where we were staying because we didn't know where we were staying when we landed. It
Yeah.
was just, we landed at Heathrow, and it was, go up to one of the kiosks and figure out which hotel we were going to stay in. We didn't tell anybody where we were, and all of a sudden, one morning we came down from upstairs. The next morning we came down from upstairs, and Dad was in the lobby. So, so that endeared you to this family very quickly.
Well, you said you were heading down from the airport on the metro as we speak. So I got out of the pub. That's what we do over there, by the way. We're in pubs a lot. And I ran down the stairs and I said, I'm going to meet this guy right here as soon as he gets off. And it's the end of the line at St. James. And so there's hardly anybody on there. And the people getting off, you'll be able to see each other. And yeah, I saw you. But backing up just a bit, I thought the funniest thing about when I called you and said I had tickets was I have one to each game, right? And I called and you said, well, wait, let me check. I got to check with my wife. This is big. This is big. You went upstairs, you check with her. And she says, I always get emotional about this stuff. She says, oh, you're not going. We're going.
Yeah.
And it was like, so then you get to Newcastle, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the full time we're going to be spending trying to get Tara a ticket. I ended up getting it to both games. I mean, through miracles, like we always pull.
When on Tyneside, absolutely, it's just a magical place. So
people come through for you, and we give out a lot too. I gave out some San Diego T-shirts. People think I'm from San Diego. It's like, no, I just support those guys 100%. But because they came up with a nice pattern, and Shade had you and I on different podcasts over time. So then we watched each other's podcasts. We got to know each other that way too. And it's just been a magical couple years,
Indeed. Yep. It sure has.
So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so your connection to Newcastle is?
Well, we'll get into the stories then. My connection is because my grandparents and my father were born there. And so they were born in Newcastle, lived in Newcastle. My dad, when he was young, I mean, he was like 3 or 4 years old, they got on a boat and decided they're coming over to the U.S. And he grew up in New York. But, you know, when you land in New York in the harbor there and you go through Ellis Island, you're just one of a handful of immigrant groups. And, you know, they kind of stick together. So the British influence in our family kind of stuck together on his side for many years. And it was interesting as me, you know, I'm just a little guy, you know, 8 or 10 years old. I listened to the stories when my aunts and uncles get together. And it was really Grandma, you know, O'Hare that was like, you know, telling about our history and everything. And she raised the family here because I think our grandfather and her split at some point right after they came over.
Yeah.
And I think he had been here too long. He lived here for like a year on his own without the family, and then he sent for him. Uh, so yeah, it started at an early age, me being aware that we're from somewhere else, you know. And actually, if you look back just another generation, we're from Ireland. And
Gotcha.
then, so really, it's really funny because our family originated close to Newcastle in Northern Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And then they came over to England and settled in Newcastle. And we think it was, you know, the potato blight and all that stuff in Ireland. And they wanted jobs. So they moved to what was then a really industrial place in Newcastle,
Certainly.
mostly coal at that time, and then shipbuilding later.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it's ingrained. And my dad passed away when I was like 23 years old. I've always wanted to reconnect with Dad, and didn't have him for long in life, but
Yeah.
he made a lasting impact. And so when I went over to Newcastle, it was like, this is it. And you know, it explained how quirky we are. It explained how humble we are. It
Yeah.
explained a lot about just being who we are.
Yep.
So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And my first experience was over there in 2018. I hijacked a trip that my wife had. We went over there to see some of her friends, and I'm good to visit with people for about 3 days. And then I'm like, okay, I got to get, you know, and they're her friends. So it's not like my buddies, which I could spend, you know, 30 days with.
Sure.
So we meet with them, and we traveled from Ludlow, small town where her friends live, up to York. And I told her, as soon as we get to York, the clock's going to be ticking. Okay. I am busting out of there. And you can go or you can stay, but we are so close now to Newcastle. I'm firing up there. And she says, no, that'll be good because we'll be around people. She doesn't like to be, you know, socializing too long. And she says, no, that'll be good. We'll both go. And I'm like, great. So we went to Newcastle. I went immediately up to St. James, went to the shops, tried to buy some stuff. They didn't have the new kit yet. I was very disappointed. But it was,
Oh, it was summertime though. So
yeah,
that was kind of expected.
Yeah, it was just a few weeks before the season, and I was killing myself. I was like, oh, this is terrible. But I got familiar with town, and then we went out to Tynemouth. You know, part of the thing is to find something that she's going to like too. So
Sure.
This time we went to Tynemouth, and we stayed in a wonderful bed and breakfast there. And we've been back a couple times, and so she loves Tynemouth. My whole family does. I brought the whole family over there on different trips now. I've had multiple trips. Brought my 2 sons on one trip, brought Danny on another trip, brought my daughter recently when Shade and Eddie were over there, my daughter and Brandon, her partner.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's a strong, you know, what do they say? It's in my blood. It's in my blood.
What was your dad's last wish?
Well, he
when he was in the hospital, in the hospice, you said.
Yeah, one of the things they finally said, there's not much more we can do for you. The cancer is really just ravaging your body, and it was like, well, he said, doctor says you can eat whatever you want, you can drink whatever you want, and he said, is beer okay? And doctor said, yeah. So So my family brought him some Newcastle brown ale.
There you go.
Last beverage he had, and after that there were days of hospice and everything, but that's the last beer that I remember him having, and it was like, good, Dad, good for you.
From the home country. So there you go.
Yeah. So
I remember that part of one of our discussions. So I wanted to make sure we got that out there.
and both of us miss our dads.
Yeah.
We really do. But it's fun being a dad. I love that. And now I'm a granddad, and that little boy, Kean John O'Hare, has 2 kits already. So we're good. But how about you, Dan? I mean, one of the most exciting things, I'm going to just say this to set it up, is I think it's fascinating to me that I know 2 people, you and Eddie, Eddie Lucero of San Diego, who spent their honeymoon in Newcastle. and it's just a fascinating way to segue.
In Eddie's case, I think he decided he was going to go to Newcastle on their honeymoon. I had no idea I was going to Newcastle on my honeymoon until the wedding reception. We had gotten married. We were all doing our speeches, and my wife, my new bride, stands up in front of all of our family and friends and says, when she went to Trinity College in Dublin, she once went over to England to visit a cousin or something that was in, I think she was in Paris, and the 2 of them were meeting in London together. And my wife took the ferry over from Dublin over to Liverpool, and then she got a train from there to go down to London, and she met this gentleman from Bristol, and the 2 of them just talked on the train. I mean, as you do, you're sitting in the car, and they were enjoying each other's company and such. Well, she knew I was a Newcastle fan, and so this is 2001, late 2001, early 2002. Things like Ticketmaster and SeatGeek and all those things, they didn't exist back then.
Right.
And certainly from the United States, trying to figure out how to get tickets to Newcastle, it was to a Newcastle match. She had no idea what to do. So she emailed this guy that she had met on a train, 5-6 years before that.
Yeah.
They'd only met each other once on the train.
That's right.
And he said, "Here, why don't you let me take care of that?" And so then he arranges for the tickets, and that ended up being his wedding gift to us. And so then that's part of the story as well. But in 2018, my wife and I took our 3 kids, and we went over and we toured all over the UK. We landed in Glasgow, then we went down to Newcastle, then we went down to Stratford upon Avon, and then down into Bristol, and that's where I got to meet Jerry, the guy from the guy who got us the tickets. Then we went to Cardiff, then we went to Ireland, and we drove all 4 corners of Ireland as well. But that was in 2018. So I finally got to meet the guy who got us the tickets, 18 years after we got married or something like that. So that was neat. And my wife hadn't seen Jerry since she saw him on the train. So it had been over 20 years since she had seen Jerry. And that was just a neat circumstance altogether.
Isn't it wonderful? Just one little gesture by somebody, and it lives forever. And 20 years later, you're talking to them again, and they remember it.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, and it's a similar story. I mean, I don't have a direct connection to Newcastle other than when I was in college. I live in North Carolina. I went to college with a bunch of international students who played for the college soccer team, who were Division II or Division III soccer team. I can't remember. But a lot of kids were over there from Ireland and England and Iceland, and they were playing on both. We had athletes that were playing on both the men's and women's teams. But in our apartment complex, in our stairwell, we had 4 apartments, and I was roommates with a Malaysian a kid from Malaysia whose name was Derek, and he was a Manchester United supporter. And then below us were two guys from Dublin, Carl, who was a Liverpool supporter, and Paul, who was also a Manchester United supporter. And
the two worst teams.
Well, but I mean, and they said, they knew all about soccer and Premier League. And I had grown up. My dad was in the army, so I had grown up bouncing all over the world. So I remember living in Germany when the '82 World Cup was held in Spain. I remember. We lived in Munich, so I got to see Bayern play. I got to see 1860 Munich play, and see kits all over town of both teams, that kind of thing. So I played soccer when I was a kid. I was not a very good soccer player, but I loved the sport. So I liked hanging around these guys that played for the soccer team, and I ended up dating one of the players on the ladies' team, whose ex-boyfriend was Paul, the Manchester United supporter from Dublin. So anyway, I get to know all these guys, and then we find out from our poli-sci instructor that Match of the Day highlights, 2 weeks old, were on the local cable access show at midnight on Sundays.
Wow.
And I had an 8 o'clock class on Monday, and I had a TV. The guys from Dublin didn't have a TV, so they would come upstairs into our apartment, and they would watch Match of the Day highlights with Derek in our living room on my TV, and we shared a wall with my bedroom. So they were hooting and hollering about their teams and results and stuff and goals that they'd watched on the program. I wasn't going to sleep and make it to an 8 o'clock class, so I went in and started watching with them. And they said, "Well, if you're going to watch with us, you got to pick a team." So.
Well, it's not yours, and it's not yours.
Well, of course, Carl wanted me to support Liverpool because he was up against two Manchester United supporters, and then another Paul. We had Paul Hanlon from Dublin and Paul Smith from Nottingham. Well, the kid from Nottingham, of course, was a Forest supporter, and then some of the Icelandics would come over, and they were either Chelsea fans or Coventry City fans or Leeds fans. Leeds United. So anyway, we would all get together and watch, and they said you have to pick a team, and I just never, red has never been my color, and at the time when this was the early '90s, gang initiations were taking place all over the United States, and let's just say red and blue colors were involved, and so if I was going to pick a team, and if I was ever going to get a jersey. I wasn't going to wear red, and I wasn't going to wear blue because I didn't want to, pick a color that could be, dangerous. My favorite color is deep purple, like a Crown Royal bag of
there you go.
like deep purple. There weren't any teams that were deep purple, so I picked black and white stripes simply because they look neutral. They showed up on black and white televisions or on color televisions. They look like football referees, so that even though they're biased, they look impartial because they look like referees in America. So I picked them. Little did I know, Peter Beardsley, Andy Cole, Rob Lee, John Beresford, Barry Venison, Steve Howie, Steve Watson, David Batty, David Ginola. I mean, you name it. I mean, I started following the team.
Yeah.
And then that same poli-sci instructor had a bootleg copy of Championship Manager 93-94 that we put on the computer, and we started playing marathon games into the middle of the night for weeks on end. And that's how I got to know the players in the league as well. That's how I knew who David Cantona was. That's how I knew who David Beckham was. That's who I knew who Steve Bruce was, who Gary McAllister was, and Kevin Keegan and Kenny Dalglish, managers of Newcastle and Blackburn. That's how I got to know all this because, well, the internet wasn't the internet back then. It was, what's your baud rate on AOL, right? So, I mean, and in America, there, the coverage wasn't all that great. So I really relied on that nascent internet connection at the very beginning, and I would read things on Team Talk or Talk Sport, or I was just a voracious reader of anything that had to do with Newcastle. And then, of course, I graduated from college in North Carolina in '96, moved to California because my dad was in the Army, and we had not spent. My dad was a geographical bachelor for 8 years. He moved all around the Eastern Seaboard, while my mom and my brother and I stayed in North Carolina. So I decided after college graduation, I'd come out to California and spend a Christmas, with them. I'd live under this house. My dad's quarters on post was a 6,000 square foot house that was built in 1906, survived the San Francisco earthquake. And I could come and go as I pleased. I just didn't disappear for 48 hours. and it was great. And then of course that summer was Euro 96, and the golden boot winner at Euro 96 was hometown hero Alan Shearer, who then returned to Newcastle that summer for a world record fee of 15 million pounds back then. World record fee for 15 million.
Absolutely.
That's a drop in the bucket now. You can't buy a reasonable player for less than 30 million at this point. But anyway, that kind of knowing that he had the opportunity, he had a couple of opportunities to join Manchester United. You and I both know that if he had joined Manchester United, he would have won everything. He would have won FA Cups and European Cups and Champions League. But he went home. He chose the pull for him to go back to Newcastle and wear that beloved number 9 jersey was all he needed. And even though he didn't win anything in his 10 years at Newcastle, he wouldn't trade him for the world. That I was already black and white in my blood at that point, but that solidified it. Just the fact that the pull for home was so great that arguably the greatest striker in England, came home. That made everything. And
and that's a funny thing, is because that's one of the most admirable things that I like about their history, is like when Kevin Keegan went, to save Newcastle, when Alan Shearer
twice,
when
as a player and then as a manager,
as a manager, and when Alan Shearer, that stuff rarely exists anymore in sport. Everybody goes to the highest bidder or whatever, and they just, in some cases you got to appreciate that that's what they got to do with a short career span. But when it's something
you've seen
like
that twice. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It's beautiful when something like that happens, and that especially our humble fan base just really appreciats that stuff,
especially when it's one of their own. Again, we've had two other instances. Peter Beardsley played in the 80s, went away, played for Liverpool, played for Everton, played for Manchester United, played for Vancouver Whitecaps,
right?
Under Bobby Robson, and then he returned to Newcastle, and Kevin Keegan convinced the board that he was younger than that Peter Beardsley was younger than he actually was, in order to convince them to buy him. Same thing with Lee Clark. Lee Clark left Newcastle under auspicious circumstances, and then went to play for Sunderland and went to play for Fulham, and was everywhere. But then he came back on a free transfer and still lives in the area. So here's 3 Geordie boys that came home and felt the pull again to come back home. So and you and I being devoted family men, this is that it just speaks to our souls, and that's with all that. That's what connected us to this club.
Hey, so when we're trying to let people know who we are, and I just want to summarize a couple things that Dan said, because he deserves more credit than he's giving himself. The first thing is he said, well, John, I don't have a direct connection to Newcastle. Oh my God, you do. How many people on the planet have had their honeymoon in Newcastle? How many people travel halfway across the world to go to Newcastle on their honeymoon? So that's
I'm sure the number is small.
Yeah, just forget that. You have a direct connection. And then we've repeated that several times. And then the other thing I want people to know is you followed football / soccer, whatever you want to call it. You followed it for over 30 years. and this is your team.
Yep.
And what I found in talking to other Newcastle fans is you're a walking encyclopedia of Newcastle. I mean, you really do. There's another guy that I know in Hebron, Davy Craig, who is the same way.
Yep.
When I need a little something to fill in my memory bank about the history or whatever, you two are the top, and I'm happy to have both of you as my friend.
And we count us lucky to be yours. That encyclopedia knowledge up there has come in handy a couple of times.
That's right.
In 2000, I moved to California in '96. In 1996, Major League Soccer started, and the San Jose Clash at that time, now the Earthquakes, again, celebrating their 50th year, by the way. They played Aston Villa at Spartan Stadium on the campus of San Jose State, and I was sitting there, and that was in 1997. In 1997, I said, well, if Newcastle ever comes to the United States, I'm going. I don't care where they're playing. I'm going to go.
Right.
So in early 2000, I just started dating the woman who is now my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Carl, the Liverpool fan from Dublin, sends me an email and asks me to be the best man in his wedding. I've never been to Dublin. I think this is a fantastic idea. My wife, who spent a year at Trinity College in Dublin as a foreign exchange student, I say to her, my girlfriend at the time, saying, I'm going to go to Dublin. And she says, I'll come with you.
Yeah.
Then she was asked to be the maid of honor in a wedding in Santa Barbara by a college friend of hers on the exact same day as the wedding in Dublin.
Oh,
so
my
she
God.
she couldn't go. And literally, I think it was within days of her accepting the maid of honor position, Bobby Robson announces at a press conference that he's bringing Newcastle to the United States.
Oh, my God.
They're going to play two teams. They're going to play Columbus Crew, and they're going to play DC United. And the game against DC United is on the exact same day as the wedding, that I'm the best man in Dublin, and my girlfriend is the maid of honor in Santa Barbara. So we couldn't be together in Dublin. We couldn't be together in Newcastle, or I'm sorry, in either of those two cities in the United States to go see my team play. So on my way to Dublin, I made sure that I got to King's Cross Station, and I could either go to Holyhead to get the ferry and get over to Dublin, or I could email Carl and say, I'm going to take another day. I'm going to get on the train at King's Cross, and I'm going to go up to Newcastle, and I'm going to go poke around town just to connect myself.
Yeah.
And then I happened to be able to go out to Chesterley Street and watch them train. And while I was out there, these two pensioners were standing there with binoculars. If you've ever been to the Chesterley Street cricket ground, they were training
way far
200, 300 yards away. You needed to use binoculars in order to see them, but it was also open training every time. So, there were 50, 60, 70 people all there watching them train out there. So I walk up, and I've got this, backpack on my back, like huge, like a mountain hiker gypsy kind of, guy. And I'm standing watching, and these two guys, pensioners with a pair of binoculars, going back and forth, and they're going, I don't recognize this guy. Who's that guy? I was able to fill in that. I said, that's Carl Court. Who's the guy with the long hair? Daniel Cordoni. Cordoni, was he Italian? No, Argentinian. That kind of, where are you from? California. How do you know that? The internet. And at one point, the guy took the binocular strap was around his neck. He just hands me the binoculars with them still around his neck and lets me look.
Yeah.
So then I went into town, and I went to Strawberry, and I sat and had a bottle of brown, and I was all by myself. And then all of a sudden, these construction guys walk in. Well, they're walking in from St. James's because that was the summer it was being expanded from 36,000 to 52,000. So they're all sitting there, and they're all talking, and you get a group of Geordie guys together, and they're talking about the club, and hey, you remember this time? You remember this time? And remember that time at Antwerp? And I said, when Rob Lee scored a hat trick of headers. And I mean, the whole table, 5 guys all turned around and said, "Where are you from?" I said, "California." He said, "What are you here for?" I said, "I'm a Newcastle fan." They said, "Well, then come over and drink with us."
Yeah.
So, I mean, as we said, magical things happen when we're in
Oh,
Newcastle.
yeah. And we've had a few of those on our last trip,
Mhm.
and we look forward to some more this year. Yeah.
Again, we have to. I have to go on record and just make sure, because I know she's going to watch this later. I have to say again, what a badass my wife is.
Oh, she's wonderful.
She
She's wonderful.
she created the name of our show. She surprised me at our wedding reception with tickets
Yeah.
to the Good Friday match against
Yep.
Everton back in 2002. Um,
Yep.
and we went over there in 2002, and because I got talking to some guy in the Strawberry, next thing you know, we're on the front page of the Journal the next morning. We were
Yeah.
interviewed by BBC and ITV. We got to meet Sir Bobby. We
That
got to meet
was fantastic.
Craig
That was
Belsey. I got to meet Alan Shearer, and he said, "I read about you in the newspaper." Speaking of, so we're
Yeah.
on the front page of the Journal. I haven't been able to find my journal, but I brought some props. Here's
Yeah.
the Metro that came out while we were there, and it was when Dudley Moore passed away. So that gives some context. But their couple kickstart their honeymoon, and that's
Yeah.
a little blurb in the Metro about us. But my dad, who was in the army, he was on his way back to Pakistan from our wedding, and he was still down in London. And he said he was working at Downing Street, and he said he went into the office and there was like this commotion. There was a whole bunch of people, that he was working with while he was there, who were all crowded around a desk. And when he entered the room, all of a sudden they all turned their backs and someone slammed something in a drawer, and they all got these sheepish looks on their faces. And Dad said, "What?"
What's going on?
And the lady, and one of the ladies said, "You'll never guess where your honeymooners are today." And Dad said, "Let me guess. Knowing my boy, they're on page 3 of the Sun." And everybody in the office, their jaws just dropped. And they went, "How do you know that?" Well, there it is. Dudley Moore passed
Yeah.
away. There
Right.
it is. But there's the Sun. Pardon me.
I'm surprised that newspaper is lasting. There it is, Bride in Tune. There they are.
Yeah, there they are. They're a self-censor. There you go. But
Yeah.
there we are on page 3, and I tell everyone that I married a page 3 girl.
That's
I married
right.
a page 3 girl in the Sun. No, my wife is a badass. Like you said, when you offered the ticket to come over last May, I went upstairs to check with my travel agent and said, "I have a ticket to a Newcastle match," and her first words were, "When are we leaving?"
That's right. That's right.
And I'm like, "What's this we shit?" And she said,
I
"You're not going without me." And I was like,
that's
"Okay, great."
right.
So,
I
so
I love her already. We're already family. She's the greatest. I
and
mean, I love it when
we're both
somebody.
coming. So
Yeah,
we're both coming in March. So the 3 of us are going to go see West Ham and Everton again. So
Everton. Yep. Yeah, it's great when we can find like 2 games at home back
yeah,
to back.
yeah.
So we're gonna try and make the most of that. And by the way, I'm wearing my Alan Shearer jersey,
There you go.
and I'm bringing this over. And boy, just a message to Alan if he's listening. I know you're not, Alan, but somebody can maybe
We'll
forward this to him.
we'll tag him on Twitter. It's okay.
Yeah, Alan, I'm giving you 3 chances to sign this thing, okay? I'm gonna be at the West Ham game, I'm gonna be at the Everton game, and then I'm flying directly from Newcastle to Nashville because Premier League Mornings is gonna be there
Gotcha.
April 6th and 7th, and I'm hoping you come over. But if you don't, I'll be pretty upset, but, of course, I'll ask the same thing next year when I come back over. Please sign my jersey. Yeah.
And my wife is already asking me, any chance we could reach out to the club and see if we could say hi to Shola Amiobi again, like we did
Oh,
last
yeah.
spring.
Yeah,
So
we gotta do that because he was a part of your honeymoon.
He was a 19-year-old young man and
Yeah.
nursing a knee injury, but my wife, he was my wife's favorite player.
Yeah.
Because there weren't a whole lot of guys on the team back then that she was older than, So, 21-year-old young lady, and here's this young 19-year-old kid. But we met him outside the reception desk at St. James's, and he was just so gracious and so
It was.
kind. And
Yeah.
then on
I
game
was there.
day, yeah,
I was.
well, no, but I mean, no, I mean on our honeymoon, we met
Oh, yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we met him when he was 19,
Yeah.
and he was in street clothes. Are you all right? Yeah, my knee hurts. This, that, the other. Then at the game, we saw him again in the reception, and he's there wearing a what would now be considered a typical youth player or something like that. But he looked like a Blues Brother. He was black shirt. I mean black uh, two-piece suit with a white shirt and a black tie. That was
Yeah.
very classy. But he took a picture with my wife in her tune top and everything. And then I saw him again when Newcastle came over and played Kansas City in 2011 under Alan Pardue. I just said his name as he passed by, and he just got the biggest grin on his face, and he turned around and said, "Where's your wife?" And we had just had baby number 3 at that point. So
Yeah.
then we got, like I said, like you hinted at, we got to reconnect with Shola last spring in Newcastle, and then we saw him at every one of the fan
Right.
events on the summer series last summer on the East Coast. So
Yeah.
just the connections to this club. I said earlier that for me, my ties to the area are not blood. Yours are blood. But
Yeah.
once you get this club in under your skin,
Yeah,
you're
it's in
done.
your it's in
Yep.
your blood too. It's in
So
there.
I'm
And
very
so
much
what
looking
was
forward to
fun
it.
what was fun was I got to see, and I knew this ahead of time, is, I got to see Shola connect with you guys 20 years later and recreate some of the same pictures that you had. So now you have pictures from way back when with Shola as a 19-year-old and then present day. And that was fun. I mean, your wife was tearing up, but so was I. I was too. I think it was great. We had a good friend who is with the club who lined it all up for us.
Yep.
And
Shout out to Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Matt Willis did a great job. He connected you guys, and I appreciate what he did.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
I appreciate both of you for making that happen. That was a very special moment. And then again, we got to continue that all during the summer whenever we saw them in Philadelphia and Atlanta, and then again in New Jersey. We got to see them and connect with them, and it was always fun. So yep.
yeah, good stuff.
Indeed.
So, well,
what
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so we talked a little bit about what the name was about. We've now introduced ourselves to those who haven't seen us on other podcasts and such.
Right.
What are our thoughts about what do we want to do with this? Where do we want to go?
And we both have ideas, and we want to capture even more from people that will support us.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in the stories like we've been covering just today. I'm interested in the connections to the club that people have. And again, shameless plug for Shade and the guys in San Diego who did a good podcast, and I really want them back somehow doing podcasts. But they brought out some good stories in their connections to different clubs. And I've talked to these people because I learned about them through Shade. And really they I didn't realize. I mean, I kept my head down for 30 years and I just raised my family and I went to Orioles baseball games. And once I retired, that's when I had time to reconnect. And also, shortly after reconnecting and going to Newcastle in 2018, and then following the club from 2018 forward, I had 2 years of lockdown where I was in the house just watching videos, watching, podcasters like Tyneside Life, so I get a feel for the town. And
Adam P.
Yeah, Adam Pearson and Rubenstein, one of my favorite guys, just a good
Yep.
guy. And
And Lee at UFC Fans TV.
yes, and
And
John Sinclair, and so I fully immersed myself in all that stuff, and so I want to hear how other people got connected and then stayed connected and now can't shake it. They can't let it go. So that's one of the things I want to bring out.
sure. We've made friends with Chris Rodriguez over at the Newcastle and UFC Insiders. Who
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
based in Missouri, so not far
right,
from you.
right.
But also another guy who just discovered the club, and it's in his skin, and he just wants to further his audience as well. I
Yeah,
want to know more of his story, so I'd love to have him on. And
yeah,
like you said, the shameless plug, the guys in San Diego, we want to have them on,
yeah,
or Jim from Nashville,
yeah,
or Peter from New Jersey, or Josh from Denver,
right.
or
Right.
Bev from Chicago,
Chicago. Yeah,
or Mark and Jane from Orlando.
yeah.
We know lots of people
Sure.
in North America who
Courtney
are
in
Courtney
Courtney in
in
Miami.
Miami.
Yeah,
So we
and
know all these people, and I think it'd be great if we could just help get their stories out and how they discovered the club and what's kept them connected all this time.
yeah, and that's going to be a big part of it. And of course, when we meet, it's going to happen when we have one of these shows. If it's directly after a game, we're going to talk about the match too.
Sure,
We're going to
sure.
compare notes. We're going to say, hey, how'd the match go? And then, hey, where do you think we are? We've got 20 games under our belt. What's next? What do you see happening? Are we
Yeah.
getting those guys back this week? And by the way, I'm feeling like we might see some guys. So yeah, we're going to cover the team as well.
And we'll dip into some history,
Yeah,
for,
yeah,
like you said, you were in the footy wilderness for 30 years, raising a family and working towards retirement and such. So, you know,
yeah,
I on the other hand, was glued to the internet and was following every single thing. So, I mean, we could dip into birthdays, or we could have themed shows, like how many players wore this jersey number, and your favorite memories of that. And
yeah.
we can invite some of our friends on as well, and we could have those discussions, and people would learn about
That's right.
who is David Junela, and why is number 14 important to Newcastle,
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. There's another guy who wears number 14 now,
yeah.
who, you start looking at that number 14,
He's a
what
he's a
what
sniper.
right, what does the word insomnia have to do with jersey number 14? You'll dip into the history and you'll find out.
Yeah,
So like I said at the beginning, when we originally were approached about having the show, it was, well, there's lots of shows out there. I mean,
yeah,
and there's lots of people talking about the day-to-day business of what is Newcastle United.
yeah.
But we're Yanks, and there are some out there who are like, if you weren't born in Newcastle, you're not a Geordie, and you can't be a fan. And we have discovered in our many trips to Newcastle that that's not a feeling that's prevalent on Tyneside. If you
No,
love this club,
it's
you're
not.
one
In
of the
fact,
family.
in fact, social media is pretty ugly, nowadays. But every time we're there, we feel like we belong,
Yep.
and we're happy to be, you know, contributing. I contribute every month to War Flags. I contribute
Yep.
every month to the Newcastle Food Bank.
Yep.
Uh, I'll share links with anybody who wants to do the same.
Yep.
Uh, it's all about,
We'll put them in the description of this video.
yeah, we could do that. We could
There
do
you
that.
go. Yeah.
So yeah, those are great ideas, Dan. And
Just getting us up off the ground, right?
yeah, yeah. So I think we
That guy, John, that guy.
I think we covered enough ground today. We got
I
a
think
little
so.
intro out there, and I appreciate you being here, and you're just the greatest. I can't wait to see you guys at the end of March.
I appreciate, as always, our friendship, and and family. And I appreciate the opportunity to start this journey with you, John. And likewise, I'm very much looking forward to seeing you at the end of March.
All right, I'm gonna offer one of those plugs, and then
Yep.
I'm gonna say goodbye. So both of us need to say goodbye, and we'll see you guys next time.
Away the lads.
Away the lads. One last shot. You guys support Dyer Crow Shop. If you think kits are too expensive, you can show your love by buying one of their shirts. They're the greatest.
And
So,
what's the discount code again?
Baz20. Let me see if I can get it up on the screen here. I am
There it is.
there we go. BAZ20.
Thank you, Joseph Spinney, and thank you to your family in Charlotte for your shop and for your sponsorship. They've got some terrific items out there, folks. Have a look.
They really do. All right, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.